There are three things you can do to help us out.
1, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
2 is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And 3, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic, where we're joined by a music writer whose devotion to soul music is so pronounced that he revealed recently in a fantastic piece at age 17 and in a magnificent display of musical purity and petulance that he left the Savile Theatre after Garnet Mims, refusing to see the headline act, Jimi Hendrix. It's good, isn't it? It's the still fiercely principled Mick Brown.
That's fantastic.
Lovely to see you.
I didn't say
that.
It's very nice to be here. I'm not sure that's something I should be altogether proud of.
No, I thought it was fantastic. You said it in your Esquire piece. I thought it was hilarious.
I like that. It reminds me of when we were talking to Richard Thompson not long ago on one of these things. And he talked about when he was probably about 18, 19. And Fair Folk Convention was starting to happen. And he got invited to Paul McCartney's birthday party. And decided he wasn't going to go because they were a pop group.
They're a pop group. They're too middle of the road. They're a pop group. And he's regretted. Do you regret not seeing Jimi Hendrix? I think that's so funny.
I did see him subsequently, so I'm not,
Yeah.
But
Garnet,
standards had to be maintained.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that you said it was kind of noisily and petulant. So you're literally getting up and kind of rushing past people and having to stand up and move their Afghan coats. And, it's just hilarious.
Oh, God, I love Garnet Mims.
It's so funny.
I'm a huge fan. Garnet Mims has a wonderful record called A Quiet Place.
Jerry Ragavoy production, yeah.
Oh, God, it's a brilliant record.
Yeah.
Starts with somebody shouting, Johnny Dollar, as if calling for him to come in for his tea or something like that.
That's right.
Sorry.
That's good.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
It's a tangent. I love that record.
Well, look, Mick, we should start. I mean, traditionally we start in where you were growing up. I think it was London, wasn't it? And can you remember the record playing equipment in the family home? Can you remember, and what might have been on it?
That's right. I was thinking about this. It was a radiogram.
Oh. Yeah.
Sure many people were of my generation. Would have been the case for many people.
Carved wooden legs, big, rather huge piece of sort of furniture. Russian manufacture.
Okay, sure. This certainly didn't show. It certainly wasn't reflecting the political allegiances of my father, who was a sort of staunch conservative. But it was a Russian radiogram, and what would have been playing would have been the soundtrack for The Sound of Music, and Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, South Pacific. My father's big band records. There'd have been some Glenn Miller, and there'd have been some military bands.
All right. Yes.
Band of the Coldstream Guards, or the whatever they were. And the first records I would have been allowed to kind of smuggle onto this would have been. Do you remember Embassy Records?
Woolworths.
Sold by Woolworths, that's right. And I think probably the first record I'm conscious of saying I want that would have been an Embassy recording of Walking Back to Happiness on one side with Bobby's Girl on the other side. Because
Is this the Helen Shapiro?
Right. No, well, it wouldn't be, you see. That's the point, is it, Mick?
Because it was Embassy, so it would have been a cover version.
Cover version.
They were cover version. But you'd have two hits for the price of one.
I used to get bought these by
sound
aunts.
Quite right.
No, I think it's a really important kind of change point in popular music, because your aunts or your mother or whatever would think, oh, that's good enough. You're getting more songs for your money.
That's the song he likes.
And you would think, you don't want something that's like it. You want Helen Shapiro or whatever it is that you want. You know, we were in love with the record. They were in love with the song. That was it was a real change point, I think.
I think that's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. To be honest, I'm not sure I would have known that I was being cheated in that way, you know.
I did.
You're much more
not quite so principled.
No, I think I was probably perfectly happy putting on "I Wanna Be Bobby's Girl." You know,
body,
exactly, walking back to happiness. So that would have been. But I think the first record I actually sort of
remember shelling over my own pocket money for would have been, and a proper record as opposed to an MC record, would have been Big Bad John by Jimmy Dean.
Oh,
right.
yes.
Yes.
Remember that?
About a collapse in a mine.
That's right.
And Big Bad John holds up the roof, doesn't he?
Exactly. He holds up the
So
roof.
everybody can get out, and he dies, doesn't he?
It's tragic. Very tragic. Big Bad John.
Yes, that's brilliant.
These things that strike us when we're kind of, what was this, pre-teen, presume? Is this 11,
Well,
12?
this is quite recently. Yeah, no, pre-teen. Yeah, I mean, I'd have been. When was that record released? 50,
I don't know.
maybe.
I
I'd probably
used to get played on the radio a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, I'd have been maybe 9 or 10, something.
Right,
maybe
right.
11. I don't know. It's all a bit of a blur
Beatles,
before the serious stuff kicks in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to like all those morbid songs, you know. Do you remember Ebony Eyes, the Everly Brothers?
Yeah, I know the song, but
It's about a plane crash. He's
Oh God, the one I remember was "Tell Laura I Love Her." Do you remember that one?
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
Isn't that a kind of? There was a series of singles about terrible motorcycle.
Oh yeah.
Because it was the whole idea that don't let your daughter go out with someone from the wrong side of the tracks, as it were, on a bike.
Yeah. Leader of the pack.
Leader of the pack. Yeah, absolutely.
all
Terry.
that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So where were you living, Mick?
I was living in a place called Coulsdon, which is
Surrey, right?
Yeah, Surrey, sort of just south of Croydon.
So can you remember the record shop?
Yeah, where did you
used
buy
to go
records?
There was it was an electrical shop in Coulsdon.
Yeah, it always is.
It always is.
Yes.
And they'd have a
sort of Bakelite kind of kitchen equipment, and then Searchers singles in a little box.
exactly that. And what did I? You see, you're bringing all these memories back. I remember going in and buying a Buddy Holly record, but I can't remember what it would have been. I never bought a Beatles record, actually, not until much later on. And in a peculiar way, the Beatles kind of passed me by. But I had an older brother, and he was a Beatles fanatic, and he also had records by a group called the Eagles, not the Eagles, the Eagles from Bristol.
Oh, right.
I don't know why this stays in my mind. He had an EP by the Eagles that he'd played a lot of. But the other sort of important record shop, moving on a bit later, was I went to school in Reigate in Surrey, and there was a record shop in Red Hill where I would stop on the bus coming back from school. And by that point, I remember buying Sweet Soul Music in there and Sam and Dave and people like that. So they're very important places, aren't they? I worked in a record shop.
Great. Which one?
It was called Diamond Records in West Croydon. And it was fantastic. It was just a brilliant record shop. And there was, at this point, I was editing a sort of running a soul music fanzine. And so I had a Saturday job there, and I'd sell the fanzine off the counter. They very kindly let me sell a fanzine off the counter. And I was going to a place called the Orchid Ballroom, which was a sort of mod hangout.
Purley,
yeah,
yes,
great, heaven by any other name, Nirvana. And at Diamond Records, you'd have the mods would come in who'd been at the Orchid Ballroom and the Top Rank Suite in Croydon. And they knew who their market were in Diamond Records. So they'd sell a lot of R&B, a few imports, and all the mod guys were coming in on a Saturday morning and, pick up Rex Garvin and the Mighty Shouters or...
Oh, my goodness, Rex Garvin.
Whatever had been played at the Orchid on the previous Monday and Tuesday. And then as lunchtime came along, you'd have all the West Indian guys had come in their pork pie hats and spiffy suits. And we'd have a box of the stuff that I guess I didn't know it at the time, but I guess it would have been what Chris Blackwell had been delivering in his Mini. So it'd be all the Blue Beat records, Prince Buster, and all the ska records and stuff. And so basically, the day would be spent playing soul and R&B, moving into Blue Beat, with a bit of sort of the Sound of Music or whatever else was current in the charts at that time. But I can't remember what was. Well, I guess it would have been a golden age actually for British pop music. 65, 60,
right.
66. So there would have been but I wasn't really aware of that. I was
oh, really? You were just off in this little kind of.
I was off in this little world of my own. Yeah.
Well, your piece in Esquire gives the impression that was kind of it, wasn't it? From like the age of 50. What was your fanzine called, by the way?
Soul Beat.
Did you?
Oh, have you got a copy?
Oh,
let's have a look.
You probably can't. You probably can't see them.
Oh, wonderful!
You see
them a Roneo or something, is it?
Exactly.
A Roneo, they're stapled together in the kitchen.
Well, yeah, you go. That gives you a sense of the extraordinary skillful layout.
Production depth.
Did you do interviews as well, or was it just reviews?
I did. What happened was, it was actually set up by a guy called Pete Wingfield, very famous.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
right. Okay.
And there was a sort of a brotherhood, I guess, of sort of soul music fans at that point. And I was very fortunate because I had a very close family friend who was a couple of years older than me who'd introduced me to all this music. And through that, I began to sort of, buy R&B records and go to a place called Transat Imports in London where you could buy imports and stuff. And there was at that point a number of fanzines, and a number of appreciation societies. That was they weren't fan clubs. There was the James Brown Appreciation Society.
That's great.
This was serious.
It is. Not frivolous, is it?
He used to say on the back of Atlantic Records, he used to say, you can join uptight and out of sight the Atlantic Appreciation Society.
Fantastic.
By sending a stamped addressed envelope to Stratford Place, W1, because they were distributed by Polydor, weren't they, at the time?
Yes, they were.
And their office it was in there. And who ran that? I can't remember. Somebody told me recently who ran that. Anyway, sorry. But were
you a member of the James Brown Appreciation Society?
I was, yeah.
What did you get? Did they send you a kind of badges? And,
No, it's nothing that's.
It was nothing like that.
It was just like being, you're part of a sort of Masonic brotherhood.
Yeah.
But without the aprons and the compasses, really.
Yes.
And the Tamla Motown Appreciation Society, that was the big one, the Tamla Motown Appreciation Society, which was run by the extraordinary Dave Godin.
Yes,
who was, I think he was a civil servant, but
he was.
Yeah, but
he looked like one as well when you saw his picture occasionally.
Exactly, but he'd achieved the absolute sort of the ultimate, really, in Appreciation Society world, where he was invited by Motown to go out and meet Motown and meet the artists and so forth, and sort of report back on that. And then he was a really interesting guy, Dave Godin. He then went on. You may have before he died very sadly a few years back. But before that, he compiled an extraordinary assortment of CDs for Ace Records of deep soul compilations, deep soul music, which are fantastic. And I would really commend them to anybody that's interested in deep soul from that kind of period. They are, the sine qua non of deep soul.
So have you hung on to your records?
I've hung on to a lot of them. Yeah, not all of them, and some have sort of gone the way of all things, over the years. And it's extraordinary, the ones I do still have, to look at them and think, these are antiques,
Yeah, I know they're old now, aren't they?
They are 60 years old, 62 years old, some of them.
Yeah.
But no, over the years, they've been the 45s, a lot of the 45s went. What would happen is that I'd, stop me if I'm rabbiting on, but I would write to American record companies and people like Duke Peacock and Fame and Stax, and say that I, ran this soul music fanzine, and can you send me some records to review? And I don't think they had any idea that I was a sort of 14, 15-year-old schoolboy sitting in my bedroom, typing this on my borrowed typewriter. And I get these care packages that would come through from Memphis and Houston with, Roy Head records or Junior Parker records and a lot of gospel records from. I might have a letter I can. Oh, this is from Peacock Records in Houston, dated September 15th, 1965. So I'd have been 14 there.
Yeah.
And this will acknowledge your correspondence of recent date relative to your coming magazine. We would like to take this opportunity to wish you every success with the magazine. In keeping with your request, we are enclosing pictures and biographies on some of our spiritual artists. I was a big gospel fan. And that's signed by Don Robey, who was infamously, he was a guy who'd keep a pistol in the drawer.
Doesn't sound like a person to dictate a letter saying,
I'm saying very best of luck
letter
with
of the
your venture.
13th inst.
Yeah. I'm sure he had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic. Even the graphics of it. I don't know if you can see, but the letter heading is
it's beautiful.
And
It's brilliant.
Rasta Street, Houston 26. So it was wonderful. And they'd send these, I dug these out for you so you could see.
Right.
When you went to the Orchid Ballroom, so describe what you used to wear, because that's a very specific thing. Can you just paint a picture of what you looked like, aged 16 or whatever?
Well, it was a very mod place. It was a place, one of the places where, and this would be a year or two before my time, where the scouts from Ready Steady Go, when they were looking for dancers, would go to different places around London, and that was one of their key places. They go to the Orchid Ballroom to sort of scout for mods to appear on Ready Steady Go. Everybody wore suits. Everybody wore mohair suits, and I had a beautiful sand-colored 3-button mohair suit with a 16-inch single vent up the back. And turn-ups, and I wear that with sort of buckle loafers, with a sort of mod crop, where the hair sort of brushed back from the crown, with a sort of parted at the side, cut by a guy called Antoine in South Croydon, who was a sort of closeted homosexual, as he would have had to have been at that time. And it was wonderful. It was just. I can't tell you how exciting it was to sort of push through the big double doors, pay your 15 bob or whatever it was, and then go into the loo and adjust your hair, and you're wearing your Brood aftershave, and you light a cigarette and step onto the dance floor. It was the largest dance floor in Europe, and they would have bands playing. I mean, so dance bands playing on a Saturday. But Mondays and Wednesdays would be a sort of what they called, I guess they call them disco nights, but they'd be mod nights basically. And there were fantastic live acts would play. I saw Stevie Wonder there. I saw Otis Redding. I saw Ike Tina Turner Review. I subsequently saw Jimi Hendrix, the All-Ons, Clarence Frogman Henry. And all these artists would be brought over by a guy called Roy Tempest. And there was a circuit in those days where Mecca ballrooms, which the Orchid was one, and then I think they played places like the Twisted Wheel in Manchester and different venues up north as well. And when he couldn't, I must have seen about 5 different versions of the Drifters, who were always changing personnel. But I guess when he couldn't get the original artist, he would bring over, or perhaps recruit locally, 3 guys, and the building wouldn't say the Impressions; it would say the Fantastic Impressions.
Yes, that old ruse. That went on a lot.
Ruse. Yeah. And I remember having the temerity once, talking to the Impressions and going along in high excitement, and actually shouting out, "Where's Curtis Mayfield?" And somebody from one of the group, he couldn't come.
Don't spoil it, mate.
Yes. South London accent says no, sorry.
Yeah, well, I think it probably was. Yeah, I don't know where the Fantastic Impressions actually came from.
Yeah,
but certainly it was the real Otis Redding. It was the real Stevie Wonder. It was so boy, what an education that was.
Incredible.
See these acts.
Amazing thing.
Fantastic.
It's still there, isn't it? The Orchid Ballroom, I think.
Not as a ballroom. It went through different sort of incarnations. It became I think it was roller skating at one point. It's a gym now, health club or something.
Oh dear.
Oh, that's sad.
Very deflating.
We had no need for those things back in 1965 at all. There were no health clubs whatsoever. Did you ever play music yourself? Did you ever perform?
No, never performed. I had a guitar, and which I take round to the friend I mentioned earlier, who introduced me to all this stuff, and we'd sit there kind of strumming, trying to play Jimmy Reed songs, 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never got any further than the bedroom, and the world will be very grateful for
that. Okay. So, what did you go to university? You moved away and so forth?
No, didn't go to university. I left school at 16, and worked as did various things, including I worked for Payne's, the chocolate factory, and cleaning out the bottles in their sort of laboratory. These were all. I'd always wanted to be a journalist, and
you were a messenger boy, weren't you?
I was a messenger boy. Yeah,
publishing house or something. I mean, you mentioned that
messenger
piece.
boy for Haymarket Press.
Yeah,
and then eventually, then I had a very unfortunate spell working for Simpsons of Piccadilly, the clothes store. Got fired from that. I seem to have got fired from most things I did, really.
What do you have to do to get fired from Simpsons? Can we ask?
Just to be kind of hopeless and sort of indifferent to the sort of demands. I once there was somebody called Eric Robinson, probably a name that won't be familiar to many people. He was quite a famous BBC band leader.
Yes, right.
And he came into the men's department one day, and I was. Usually I'd be behind the scenes, kind of ironing or folding or doing sort of, menial chores. And occasionally I'd be let loose on the sales floor. And he came in, and I served him. And he bought a sports jacket and a couple of pairs of trousers. And we came to the till. And I said, how would you like to pay? And he said, account. So I asked for his account card. And he said, Eric Robinson, BBC. This is my account card.
Oh no! Oh my Lord!
It's only in that spirit, esprit d'escalier, that I thought I should have said we have to punch all account cards, but I didn't sort of. Anyway, so eventually I got into journalism, and that's the.
How did that come about then? How did you get your first piece in a national publication? And what was that?
The first thing I wrote, I worked for, I got a job doing advertising production for a paper called Property Advertiser, and a very nice man. We all have mentors, don't we? We all have people who we're eternally thankful to for.
Sure.
And Ken Thompson, who was the boss there, he knew I wanted to write, and as part of the selling advertisements, they had this thing where you'd write some sort of editorial copy to go alongside them, and so it was property. And so I must have done this, I don't know, half a dozen times. Drive up the A12 to housing developments in Colchester or sort of Braintree, and then have to write about these housing developments. So on the golden ribbon to your dreams, driving the. So I did that for a while.
Kent Riviera. Yeah.
And then I went to work for IPC magazines as a sub on a magazine called Club, which was a sort of men's magazine.
Oh wow!
And that again was an incredible sort of. I've been so lucky. I've really been so lucky because that was an incredible sort of education, because. Starting as a sub, and then another great mentor, Terry Hornet, who was the editor of a great figure in sort of teenage magazines and young magazines at that time, gave me a chance to write, and so I started reviewing records for them. And this was what, by this time it's sort of 1970-ish, because I remember interviewing Michael X, who was the British Black Power leader. I did Black Power in Britain. I did. Interviewed the Oz 3 at the time of the Oz trial.
Oh, amazing. Really? That would have been really interesting.
Yeah, so it was amazing.
Felix Dennis only about 23 at the time, was it? Was it 24? Was it incredible, really?
Yeah. So in fact, I remember the trial very well, because the IPC offices were on Farringdon Road, just a short walk from the Old Bailey, and going up to the Old Bailey at the time of that trial that was going on, and the demonstrations outside, and effigies of the judge being sort of burned and not burned.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was a big deal. The Oz trial was a really big deal at that time, and Charles Shaw Murray, I think he was one of the kids.
He's one of those. It was.
Yeah, he was
one
of the contributors. I think he gave some kind of evidence in court, didn't he? I think.
Did he? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, he was one of the contributors to the School Kids issue, wasn't he?
Did either of you ever have anything to do with the underground press? Did you work on the underground?
No, I remember reading Oz once or twice, and actually being it's terrible to say, I was being really frightened by it. Actually, I was about 16 or 15, and I just found it really scary.
The strange thing the interesting thing about those things, if you look back at them now, IT and Oz and so forth, is the emphasis that it placed on female nudity.
It's true.
Because it was clearly a way to just sell copies.
You look
at how many Oz covers are. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary to think that stuff. So Terry Hornet, this was Carlton magazines, wasn't it? Terry Hornet.
He went on. I think he went on to found Carlton magazine.
Well, he did. All right, fine.
Yeah.
What's the woman who worked with him? I can't remember. Anyway,
Bridget Rowe.
I could have been.
Yeah.
When did you get into the broadsheets and stuff like that? Was that later on? And let's try and get the sequence right.
So I went to live in America for a while in 1974.
Yeah.
And was living in New York and then in LA, just not for very long, just for 9 months or something. And I was doing some things for the LA Free Press in Los Angeles. And also started doing some bits and pieces for Rolling Stone, just small pieces. And then
about what kind of acts?
Who did I do? I think I interviewed Bruce Johnson. Was it Gordon Lightfoot? Maybe one of those kind of American focus of that sort of
very Rolling Stone. Yes.
Yeah, very Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone. Small pieces, but LA Free Press, I did some things for, and at that point, I didn't meet him, I'm sad to say, but Charles Bukowski was a columnist for the LA Free Press at that time, and the LA Free Press. You mentioned I think that was probably kept going by the sex ads in the back of it.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, and you buy it out of a. Do you remember that in LA? They have those
vending machine,
those big bins, and you put 5 cents in and lift it up and take a copy. But so that was a really interesting sort of experience. And I remember coming back from LA armed with, the first Tom Waits album, all sorts of kind of goodies that I'd sort of managed to plunder from the record stores there, from the record companies, I should say, not record stores. And then I carried on freelancing, and I guess the first broadsheet thing I would have written for would have been The Guardian, doing music reviews.
Yeah,
and then some sort of interviews.
In the days when you had to phone them in, you had to dictate them to a copy taker.
Yes, and who would be saying much more of this old boy, What I try to do, I'd always prefer to go into for The Guardian, I'd always prefer to try and go into the office immediately from the show and just sort of write it there so you could hand it over rather than The first time I went into the Guardian, maybe the second time I went into The Guardian, there was the very nice arts editor, Patrick Ensor, his name was, had introduced me to a man named Richard Gott, who seemed to be the sort of Guardian in excelsis. And Richard Gott was a fellow with a sort of a Lenin beard, a sort of Marx beard, balding, wearing a sort of observer offer fisherman's smock and sandals, and tools. And he held out his hand and said, "Greetings, comrade." which I thought was wonderful. And he was subsequently exposed as a KGB spy.
No. Brilliantly disguised.
Who'd have guessed it?
Yeah, double bluff. Oh, that's fantastic.
That's very funny.
So how did you end up at the Telegraph?
He asked, his eyes narrowing suspicious.
No, listen, not at all. No, because you've been there a long time. Mick.
I've been there a very long time. I freelanced for a long time. And then I went to work for the Sunday Times. I was on staff of the Sunday Times, and then left there in 1989 and was, you may remember a newspaper called the Sunday Correspondent.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
Very short-lived, sadly, but that was set up as a sort of as an alternative to the Observer, to take on the Observer.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, thank you. So I stopped writing for a while and was editing and set up the second section, sort of features, art, sort of that kind of stuff. And then that went under very, very sadly. And somebody who I'd known, a friend from the Sunday Times, was then editing the Telegraph magazine and asked me to go in, or, said, would you like to write some pieces for us? And one of the first pieces that I did, in fact, I think it was the first thing I did, was a series called Across America by song title.
Right, yes.
Someone had this brilliant idea of visiting all the cities in America, or some of the cities in America.
Because this led to a book, didn't it? I've got this.
And it led to a book, yeah. So I wrote a book called American Heartbeat.
Yes,
that's right.
That was was that my first? No, that's my second book. So the first book was a book about a biography of Richard Branson.
Yes, I remember that too.
So was it? Did your book have? Did it have chapters about songs based on cities where the artist had never gone there or something like that? Was it, because is that ringing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure there were places where the artist had never gone, but no, that wasn't a conceit of the book. I mean, it was much more straightforward. But what I hadn't designed it this way, but what it kind of turned out to be was that each city ended up, I hope or believed, represented a sort of certain facet of American life, and culture. So, Memphis was kind of ended up being about, Black America. Yeah. Milwaukee, what made Milwaukee famous, that ended up being about blue collar America.
So did you go out and research this on a kind of massive road trip?
I spent.
So you did the big drives between these places, listening to the music, and that must have been fantastic.
Yeah, all of that stuff. No, I mean, it's fantastic. It's like a dream. It was just brilliant. I mean, I didn't drive all the way. Some places I flew between. And in those days, the budgets were, there didn't seem to be any kind of limit on them. I mean, I was astonished. I wasn't staying in sort of
hello room service
hotels all the way, but it was amazing. And what a great, I'm always grateful to Nigel and a wonderful man named George Darby, whose idea I think it actually was, who was the deputy editor then.
Yeah.
So that was, and they produced. Virgin, I knew people at Virgin. They then produced a CD of the book, with all the songs from the book, which was nice.
It's such a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think it sold a thing, but anyway, it happened. So I've been incredibly lucky. I mean, throughout, I've really been, I'm
But your Sunday Telegraph and Sunday Times profiles, I can remember so many of them. We had an email exchange the other day when I attributed to you the great quote about Keith Richards, about how he doesn't so much as burn the candle at both ends as apply a blowtorch to the middle. But you claim that wasn't your. I don't remember right, because I'm sure it was you.
Of course, it was me, Mark.
Yes, let's say it was you.
Let's say, unless the person who actually wrote it is listening, I'm going to. Like, honestly, I don't know.
It's very, very funny.
Well,
so among all the people that you profiled, are there any that were just particularly astonishing or surprising or not as you imagined or memorable?
In terms of music, or
music.
Yeah, music. I mean, there was some great, some fantastic, great interviews. Marvin Gaye was amazing. James Brown was amazing. I'd always loved James Brown. I saw him the first time he performed in England at the ABC in I think it was the ABC in Walthamstow, maybe the Odeon in Walthamstow, and it was like seeing God. I mean, John, my friend, stroke cousin, had sort of he turned me on to James Brown records, and he's the person that actually took me to the show. I was probably 15 or something. Yeah, 15. But to actually see him kind of, sliding across the stage like Black Mercury and sort of twisting and diving, and then, please, 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 Mr. Danny Ray putting the capes over the shoulder, and the whole thing was just incredible. And I later interviewed James Brown twice when he came to England. Most memorably, I think probably the first time I interviewed him was he was in Birmingham, and he just played a show at the Birmingham Odeon, and he would never travel with the Flames and the JBs. Of course, he'd always be by himself. So they'd come early and been bussed up in sort of some impoverished sort of conditions, and he'd come from Augusta to New York to Heathrow, got in a car, and was driven straight up to Birmingham and did the show. I mean, it was just incredible. And the show was amazing. 2 drummers, full on James Brown experience. And I was taken backstage, and he was being accompanied by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who at that point was not the Reverend Al Sharpton we know now, was introduced to me as James's spiritual advisor, and a much younger Al Sharpton, who was very, very, very polite and very, very nice. And I was taken into the dressing room, and there was this tremendous sort of this almost Byzantine kind of politeness around James Brown. Everybody was Mr. Very pleased to meet you, Mr. Brown. Very pleased to meet you, Reverend Sharpton. Mr. Brown, this is Mr. Ray.
Yes,
yes.
Mr. Ray, very pleased to meet you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, this is Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, it's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Brown, that's my honor. And the proper Mr. Brown was because his hair, this the magnificent kind of pompadour kind of hairstyle, collapsed during the course of this frenetic show. His hair was being rebuilt under one of those hair dryers that you see women wearing in sort of northern cities, like a space helmet. So I interviewed him with my tape recorder kind of held under the.
While he was under the dryer.
While he was under the dryer. And he was great. His pearls of fantastic humor and wisdom, and a wonderful interview. And going back on the train and playing it, and all I could hear was kind of
that's right. We've all been there.
Oh yeah,
beads of perspiration popping out of your brow. Did you just make it up? Presumably you did.
Have you done? I mean, seriously, you must have done that, where you get back from somewhere and you discover the tape recorder hasn't worked, or
I always assume it's not going to work. Yeah, I've done that.
My most experience with that was when the batteries were running low, because if the batteries run low, they will play back, but they'll stop recording. Right. And I was interviewing Gary Newman. I just checked the tape and I ran it back and pressed the button, and it was Sting's voice came out. So it was the tape underneath that I was recording over. Yeah, no.
Kidding.
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
The key thing you got to do is check it really quickly. So if you've got a problem, you can at least consult your memory. The worst thing in the world is if you think, I'll transcribe that in a week's time.
Yeah.
You get there and it's not there.
Yeah, then you got to just
I did that with, I went to New York to interview Robin Trower for Street Life. I don't know why.
Wow.
Yeah. And Robin
free
Trower,
trip to New York. Could that be part of it?
Well, maybe. He was a big figure then. He was playing Madison Square Garden. Wow. And there was an after party that Andy Warhol came to. Andy Warhol would go to the opening of an envelope. But
it's Robin Trower, Andy Warhol.
That's brilliant.
That's fantastic.
I didn't know Andy Warhol was a Robin Trower fan, but there you are.
What's your favourite? Is it Bridge of Sighs? Or...
But so we did the interview, and he was very nice. I really liked Robin. But then, foolishly, it wasn't until I got back to England that I discovered the tape hadn't worked. By which point, you can't remember anything, and you can't go back to Chicago where he's playing on that tour. So that was a bit catastrophic. But yeah, you busk it, don't you? Really?
Yeah, you make up for it with colour, I think.
Exactly. It was a very colourful piece. Yeah.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was.
So have you got any other old odds and ends there? Any old records and things that you've managed to dig out?
Records. I've got this.
Oh, the Spector box.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The Spector box with.
And I'm assuming you interviewed Spector.
Yeah. I'll show you if I can get it out of the.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my Lord.
What's that?
That's terrific.
It says, to make thank you with appreciation and love, Phil Spector. And I went to Spector hadn't given an interview for 25 years, something like that. And we managed to get the interview on the Telegraph. So I went out to see him and had this extraordinary interview with him. Really extraordinary interview, where the probably most extraordinary interview I've ever had with a musical figure, where he almost as soon as I sat down and asked, "How are you?" he started to talk about, "I've not been well. I've had demons inside," and to talk about this sort of very troubled life and existence he'd had. But I'm trying to be a reasonable man. I think I've the worst of it is behind me. And those were the words that were still echoing in my mind as I was driven away in this rather magnificent 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud that he laid on back to my hotel. And then I guess it was 4 weeks after that he shot dead Lana Clarkson in where I'd interviewed him in the castle where I'd interviewed him. So that was that in a peculiar sort of way. What had happened was I'd been asked by his PA, who was Hal Blaine's daughter, Michelle Blaine, Hal Blaine's daughter, who was sort of looking after him. At that point, Spector was very, very sort of isolated figure, really. I'd been asked to send a copy of the article, magazine, when it came out, and so we posted them, FedExed them. Early binds would come up on a Thursday, and we'd FedEx them to America to arrive at the same time as they appeared here on Saturday morning. And I was in the office on the following Monday, and somebody came down from upstairs, newsroom upstairs, and said, "What did you say to upset Phil Spector?" I said,
Lord.
I said, what do you mean? I said, "Well, turn on the television." And there was film of the castle where I'd been with the police tape and everything else. And Casper, who was the editor who I was working with on the story, who sat opposite me, we looked at each other and said, "Fuck, he's read the story and he's shot the PA." We thought he'd shot Michelle Blaine, because at that point, the victim was unidentified.
Oh, really?
Lord.
But it wasn't, thank God, Michelle. Thank God it wasn't her. But
would the story have upset him that much? I mean,
well, that's what.
Was it that controversial? And
well, I don't think so. I mean, it was a very confessional story. I mean, he'd been extraordinarily candid, and I've certainly never read anything with Spector before or since that was. And I don't say that in order to sort of. I think I called him at a moment in his life where anybody could have put a tape recorder in front of him and would have got the same story, because he was just at that moment in his life
needed a therapist,
where he wanted to talk, and because he felt that he'd passed through this sort of terrible period, he felt that he's entering a sort of sunny upland. But subsequently, what happened was that we then later on that evening found out that it was this very, very unfortunate woman, Lana Clarkson, who was an actress who at that point was working as the VIP greeter at the House of Blues, and Spector had come in after cruising around LA, drinking a lot of. At the time I met him, sorry to keep going on about this. The time I met him, he was teetotal. He'd stopped drinking. Between my meeting him and the the incident, he'd fallen off the wagon. Is that what you say? And had started drinking again. And the combination of he'd taken a lot of drink that night, along with his medications and so forth. And I think he was in a pretty deranged state when he took this woman back to the castle and killed her. So there's a sort of bizarre coda to this, because subsequent to this, David Mamet made a film about the Spector trial with Al Pacino as Spector and Helen Mirren as the lawyer.
I remember it, yeah. Al Pacino in the wig, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And in this film, in almost the first scene, you see Helen Mirren arriving from New York, and the LA lawyer is brandishing some papers, and it says, Daily Telegraph article, Phil read it and shot himself. Sort of implying that somehow the article was responsible for. That's not the case. He hadn't read the piece before he killed poor Lana Clarkson. So I don't feel in any way kind of culpable for that.
No. God, what an extraordinary thing what a time to have met him. Jesus, that's incredible.
So that's, I don't have any, some lovely.
Very, very odd man. We had him at the Q Awards. Do you remember that, Dave?
God,
he was really peculiar.
Do you remember? I quote you in the book.
Do you? Oh, yes. Well, he was just so odd.
Yeah.
And all the paparazzi, when he got out the car, I told the paparazzi, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. Just wait for this. When they got out the car, no one recognized him. And one bloke just went, oh, fucking hell, it's Dudley Moore. That's right.
You're joking.
And he was very odd. He'd be very, very talkative at one point. He was talking to, and then I introduced him to Pete Townsend. That's right. And Pete Townsend. So hi, Phil. What are you up to at the moment? He said, right now I'm having this conversation with you. And you think, what a weird man. He would just blow hot and cold. Very. Yeah,
he was very. But I have to say, and he was an extraordinarily anecdotalist. I mean, he told wonderful stories and it seemed like he was sort of channeling Lenny Bruce at times. He was a great friend of Lenny Bruce and looked after Lenny Bruce for his life. So he's keeping all of these, all of these Lenny Bruce jokes, back in circulation. Yes. And he was fascinating. I mean, God, the stuff he'd done and the life he'd led and just the history of the record business, from the early 50s, mid is up till now. He was an extraordinary figure, a really extraordinary figure.
It's funny but you were saying that about the shock of what happened. It reminded me of there's a story about Joy Division, about when Ian Curtis died. The rest of the band, obviously shocked, and Tony Wilson said, "Well, didn't you read the lyrics?" And it's like, they looked at it and said, "Oh, we just thought he said stuff." You know what I mean? He was doomy figure in interviews and all those things. And it just eventually, these people, it's beyond image, isn't it? Stuff.
It's
terrible reality.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. Were you Joy Division fans? Did you like it?
No more than anybody else, really. They're not my band particularly. I don't feel that kind of ownership with them.
I can appreciate how good they are.
Yeah,
at the time, I was looking completely the other way.
Right.
At the time, I was looking at things like the B-52s. I was looking at kind of American pop music and all that.
Yeah, you could pick them, couldn't you, Mark?
Yeah.
I said, never mind this Joy Division lot. The B-52s.
That'll happen.
That's the future.
Yeah, well, to be fair, they had some success.
No, they did. They did. So, Mick, we traditionally close these chats by asking people to tell us what is the greatest record ever made. And obviously, it's Garnet Mims, A Quiet Place, or whatever.
Or Cry Baby by Garnet Mims.
Cry Baby by Garnet Mims.
I would stake my I don't have a reputation. I would stake my whatever it is on this. It's What's Going On by Marvin Gaye.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah.
Not an original choice. I'm sure. How many is it the number one in the Rolling Stone list of greatest records?
It depends on how
still is. It always was every year, and it always was at the Enemy.
Change it all the time.
The Enemy, it was always there, wasn't it? Year in.
It was always there. It's usually Yeah, actually, it used to come in like number 17 when they got near 20 and they realized they didn't have a black act there. Oh my God. Yeah. Then they go, and it's slowly ascended over the years, hasn't it?
I just love that record. I've never tired of it. It's got everything to me. I'm a real sucker for sort of sucker for soul music, obviously, but also a sucker for sort of early 70s orchestrated soul records.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I love the kind of the more raw, pared down, mid 60s sort of Stax kind of sound. I love Curtis Mayfield. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful artist. It's slightly different, but maybe falling between those two kinds of. Bobby Womack is probably one of my favorite singers. So those are the great triumph. I'm such a stereotype, cliche of my age, really. But, there's nothing. I'm afraid to say there's no artist after probably sort of 1979 who's really sort of excited me in the way that those people have. I love
everybody. Yeah,
I love contemporary music, but Olivia Chaney. I love Olivia Chaney. I think she's very gifted, talented writer and singer. Yeah, but what's going on? Come on,
right?
We could argue with that. What do you? I'm sure you've said this a million times. What are yours?
Oh, I can change my mind all the time. It depends when people ask me. I'm currently going through a very late Miles Davis phase. I'm suddenly just utterly obsessed with Miles Davis records. So that's what's front of mind for me at the moment. It'll change in 6 months' time or whatever.
Okay.
No, that's good. Oh well, gosh, I don't know. It's terrible. I might have to pick a Beatles record. I'm too embarrassed to say it, really.
Silly, come on.
But would it be Revolver? I don't know. It's possible. It might be.
It's Hard Day's Night at the moment.
Hard Day's Night. Well, we change all the time. Dave and I have a discussion all the time. But we're just going through a bit of a Beatles phase because I'm still in the kind of the glorious afterglow of watching Get Back. So, did you see Get Back?
I haven't yet.
Probably not your bag because you said early on that the Beatles.
Be obsessed. Sorry,
you've got to be obsessed to even.
No, I would love to. There was a kind of watershed moment at the Orchid, and I may be imagining that this night that there was a guy called Jeff Dexter who was the disc jockey.
No, I know Jeff Dexter.
Who was a great DJ, and I seem to have this memory of him putting on Canned Heat on the Road Again. Which was probably the first white record other than Roy Head that had been played in those Orchid nights. Years. And saying, things are changing now, guys. There was this sort of things are changing moment. That and Whiter Shade of Pale, and suddenly all the mods were a lot of the mods were starting to smoke a lot of dope and go off to Middle Earth and drop acid, and so things definitely changed, and they changed for me as well, really. I mean, all the kind of the Roy C. and Rex Garvin and the Mighty Shouters sort of probably migrated north to the northern soul scene. I started smoking dope and growing my hair long and becoming much more open to the music of that period, which I love, which I all of those great Traffic, all of that. Stones, love the Stones, love the Beatles. You can love all kinds. As Bobby Womack said, I love all kinds of music. You can love all kinds of music, I think.
Fantastic. Well, it's so nice to talk to you, Mick. That's brilliant.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.